The women converged at the National Assembly roundabout just by the three-armed zone. A quick charge from their conveners and they're off to the National Assembly. The gates of the National Assembly are locked and security personnel are stationed behind the gates. But this doesn't deter the women who bear placards and protest signs, chanting protest songs. Their demands are clear. They want the lawmakers to rescind their decision to deny Nigerian women their requests for 111 special seats for women, indigent status, citizenship status, 35% representation in party leadership, and more appointive positions in government.
The two places where the Constitution talked about women were places where they were discriminatory, where they wanted to bring the issue of child marriage, talking about who is an adult, and said when a woman is married, the woman is an adult. In a country where we know that 10-year-old, 12-year-old are being forced to marry.
The protesters are met by a delegation from the National Assembly.
If we leave here, haven't listened to you, we are going back to report back in plenary.
They refuse to be addressed by the delegation and insist on seeing the Senate President or the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Therefore, the delegation leave. The protesters also threatened to sanction the lawmakers who voted against laws favorable to women.
We want to know which lawmakers voted yes and who voted no for all these bills, because the next step for us is to mobilize at the levels of polling units.
The women wait but do not get what they requested for. Neither the Speaker of the House of Representatives nor the Senate President meet with them. They insist on keeping the roads blocked as a sign of their protest and dance as they pass away the time.
Will these women be able to make good on their threats, saying that they would name and shame these lawmakers who have voted against them? Is it possible that they will send those names to embassies as they say they have? That is easy. But for now, they say they will be at this gate, and for the days to come, until they get an explanation from their lawmakers as to why they say these lawmakers have voted against Nigerian women. From the National Assembly gate in Abuja, Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
They come out en masse to vote for you and I. You cannot now be seen working against their interests. This particular provision on party administration, I will publish this vote.
The demand was because we have capacity. We don't believe it is a favor. We know we have the capacity. And we know this isn't the end of the story.
What has happened has taken us years back. However, this is a time for women to sit back, unite, and be one.
I do not want to believe that even people who co-sponsored the bill came out this morning to vote against what they are part of sponsoring.
So that's how the conversation is going to begin. Sometimes those words the just constitution and conversation. Okay, I don't know. There is still that confusion. Do gender bills only have to do with women? I don't know. I think there is still that that understanding needs to be put out.
You know, first, beautiful morning. It's a beautiful Thursday morning in Lagos, by the way. A lot of action is happening in the nation's capital, as expected. But yes, a lot of action here in the commercial capital as well. But
especially at the fuel stations.
Oh, yes, absolutely. You can say that again. But yes, I think that's a conversation we need to have as well. But, you know, the women, they weren't asking for too much from their point of view. They just needed a bump. Some sort of push. We're coming from decades, centuries of them being, from their perspective, not given equal chances. And these things are clear, but the good thing is we're going to be having the conversation with people who have been there, people who have experienced these things. Because for a lot of people, they don't even know what women have to go through trying to reach where they reach. They just point, oh, I mean, you're a senator, so other women can be like you, but they forget the things they have to go through. And if there's anything we need to learn in life, is to ensure that we make things easier for people coming after us. That's life for us, essentially, to make things easier, always improve on things we've done. I think that's Ubuntu, right? Keep improving. So we'll get into that one.
Well, you know, unfortunately, should I say incidentally, it so happens that I don't know if whatever it is that has not gotten through at this level will get to the state houses of assembly. I don't know if the state houses of assembly, I don't think so, but I don't know if they, the state houses of assembly, will have the opportunity to vote on the bills that didn't pass through the National Assembly.
Things happen, right?
Okay, well, let's have this conversation this morning. We have 3 individuals with us in our Abuja studio. Nena Elendu KJ is a former member, House of Representatives. Ma Odi is General Secretary, Alliance for Credible Elections, as well as Honorable Solomon Bob, member, House of Representatives from Rivers State. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this morning. It will seem like the man is what's the word now? Voter overvoted in the panel. Thanks for joining us this morning. Let's begin with the women. Ladies first, as we often say. Well, let me begin with the former member of the House, Honorable Elendu KJ. First of all, your thoughts on how this went. I'm pretty sure that you have a fair enough experience on how such things would normally have happened. What do you think may have been responsible? Let's begin with the conversation around the rejection of the gender bills. What do you think may have occasioned that? Is it inadequate lobbying, inadequate consultations across board, some blindsiding somewhere? What could have been the reason for the rejection by the members of the National Assembly, largely?
Thank you very much. I believe it's age-long stereotypes. I believe it's age-long stereotypes. I believe that for the first time, women actually overreached themselves with regards to lobbying. There was a lot of engagement. There was a lot of speaking to, there was a town hall meeting. There were several opportunities for women to engage with the men. We actually had more gender champions than we've ever had. The Speaker of the House of Representatives is actually one of the sponsors of the bills, especially the one on special seats. And there was widespread engagement. So what happened, again, goes back to what it is that we've always said, is the unfinished conversation of this generation. Age-long patriarchy, the fact that the spaces, and people talk about culture and tradition, and, you know, I find it almost offensive that people still hide behind words like culture and religion and so on. It's because there's, you know, examples abound around the world. Over 41 countries in Africa alone have actually come up with special measures for women. So, you know, when you hear these things, the question becomes, who are we copying? Who are we mimicking? What kind of cultures do we share? Africa is almost a homogeneous entity. So who are we, you know, and they speak about conservative societies. One of the most conservative societies in the world is Saudi Arabia. In the last couple of months, they have opened up the spaces. 20 more women were elected or sent into the Shura Council, which is the highest, as it were, legislative body in Saudi Arabia. They have that. In Sudan, it is, you know, there's so many women in their parliaments in Sudan. In Pakistan, we have more female presidents coming out of Pakistan than probably anywhere in the world. So when we talk about these cultures and religion and traditions, my question becomes, you know, who are we mimicking? I do not think that the women didn't do a good job. I mean, only yesterday, the almost knee-jerk reaction of the women, over 200 women groups, piled onto the streets, gave up everything they were doing, their time, and came into the National Assembly, and all they sought was to speak to a principal officer. So you see that this is the first time that we've actually seen that groundswell, that knee-jerk reaction of women actually saying that they will reject this kind of non-representation of women. So did we work hard this time? Yes, I believe women worked harder than they have ever worked. I believe that we recruited more gender champions. This is the first time that we had a person no less than the wife of the vice president in the gallery, watching the votes, egging us on. And, you know, I think that, but let me also say that the outcomes were disappointing, but I think that we've moved the levers some. This is the first time that the speaker, I listened to the speaker, and he literally did what he's not supposed to do as a speaker. He almost came down and blackmailed the people into voting for the women. And I think that, you know, that is progress. It doesn't get us to where it is we want to go to, but I can assure you that women worked hard. We recruited gender champions, but, you know, as always, it is, and we always say, the old boys club, and they've shut down they've shut the doors in the faces of women again, no less on the first day of the International Women's Month, as if to add insult to injury. But I do not think that the women didn't do a great job. But you know, we'll continue to push. That's the most I can say. This just emboldens women to continue to push. But I must say that for the first time, and this is just the beginning. Because what you saw yesterday, scared or threatened the peace of the FCT, you're going to see a lot more resolute women who are going to come out and ask that the right thing be done.
Let me ask Madam Maudi as well, perhaps a similar question. Now, are there any chances? Okay, so the reactions have begun to happen. You know, women groups came out en masse yesterday and all of that, went to the National Assembly and made their case. Any hopes that the needle can move on the decisions already made?
Okay, I just want to say that I want to go back a bit to say the Constitution, they say Section 42, they relied on. That because there is no discrimination against any gender, they relied on it. Most of them that wanted to vote no, said no, there is no discrimination. That Constitution, that document that said there is no discrimination, lied against itself because he was using he, and did not know that there are also she citizens in the country. So he lied against himself. And the same Constitution empowered the male gender to confer citizenship to their foreign wives and denied the female gender. He lied against himself. So a document that lied against itself cannot be relied upon. And let me also look at it. People that are saying patriarchy, we are just asking for a temporary measure to redress the historical injustice done against us. The male gender started voting before independence in 1960. But our sisters from the north just started voting in 1979. Historical injustice. We were just asking for a temporary measure to redress injustice done against us so we can be at par with the men. And we are saying you cannot get social justice when you build your foundation on a faulty ground of injustice. So because there's a lot of injustice done against us, and when you refuse to address the injustice, that is what. And my happiness today is that we now have an electoral law that will reduce rigging. Most of the people who said no in that day before yesterday, they were brought there by rigging. They didn't win any vote. Because if you won a vote, you look at the country is not working. This country was built to run on 2 engines, and they both gender to manage it. And then they have been running on 1 engine. And the 1 engine that have been carrying it are those who lead themselves to power. And that engine is faulty from the foundation. And that's why we have dead. We have seen dead of our children our youth as if it's a normal sin. Now, when you hear 20 people died, 100 people died, they laugh and move on. Life cannot go on like this. And because the one gender that has compassion, has empathy, has been denied, closed the door. What they did is not patriarchy. What happened there before yesterday is not culture or religion. What happened is they want to punish a gender that has been responsible for the even good news you have in this country. Any success you see in this country for the past 23 years is being made possible by the female gender. We want to end bad governance in Nigeria. We want the votes to count. We want things to work. We need development. And there is no way you can achieve that without looking at the female gender.
Well, Madam, just one question that I asked you, if you can speak to it very quickly, which is, now with the advocacy yesterday.
We are prepared. Yes. As I live here, I'm going to National Assembly. We are prepared. We have other things we're also planning. We are not going to let this go. We are not. Because this is wickedness taken too far. We are not going to allow it go. We are actually going to say, if you say no, you will not come back. We are connecting with the grassroots. We are the women who do voting. The men don't vote. They watch you on TV, sit in their house, and use their social media. We are the people who vote. We are connecting with the grassroots. Anybody that says no should kiss that National Assembly by, because we are not stopping. They have mobilized us. They have brought us together, and we are going to fight back. That's what we are going to do.
Looking at especially the provision for creating more seats for women in Parliament, at the National Assembly House of Reps, 208 people voted against it and 81 voted in favor. So let me take this to Honorable Bob, because that's where, a lot of the action happened. And I'll split this question into two. One is, what's the possibility of this being reversed? Because that's what the women are asking for, essentially. Take another look. So what's the process of that? So I'll allow you answer that, to move forward, and then we'll take a look at the process itself. So is there a possibility that this can be reversed? How?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, let me express my sympathy for the views expressed by my colleagues here already. Even before we came on set, I told them what my views are respecting women's rights, to equitable representation across all aspects of politics. I've always championed that. And on the floor, on that day, I did my utmost. I didn't just vote for all the proposals on women inclusion. I did my utmost to convince those around me to do the same. So what happened was an utter embarrassment to many of those of us who on my side of the divide. Now, with respect to what has happened, there is no way by which we can revisit that. Any advocacy now will have to be tailored towards the next round of amendments. Unfortunately, that won't be in this National Assembly anymore. But overall, there's something to be said about our lawmaking process with respect to constitutional amendments. I'm on record elsewhere to have said that I think we need to rethink the whole framework and the means by which we get there. I'm not utterly enthusiastic about this process leading to anything, a sea change in our constitutional arrangements. Nothing really momentous, that can affect the substance of our constitutional arrangements. So I've always said that, well, like they say, you can't make a sick pulse out of a soul's ear. So there's only so much you can get from this kind of arrangement. The Constitution itself has embedded in it, so many impediments that will make profound changes, constitutional changes, impossible. Okay? So directly, I responded to what you said, your question about what can happen. At the moment, our rules forbid the matter being revisited. We're done at the House, and the Senate is done too. National Assembly, essentially, is done with respect to those proposals that were rejected. That is very sad. It's a sad day. Like my sister here said, we need to take a leaf from what's going on elsewhere. Just don't look beyond Africa, just within ourselves, Africa here. You see so much, so much.
So regarding... Let me give you the other side of the question, Honourable. So regarding the reason this failed, I recall my colleague asking Honourable Elindu KJ about the kind of lobbying that took place in the build-up to this. I mean, trying to understand where things didn't quite go well, because it looked like this was going to sail through. You had the wife of the president visiting, now the wife of the vice president. In fact, it was in her presence that those bills fell through. So what exactly do you think happened on the floor of, both chambers and even before? Was it that there was inadequate lobbying? Is it as a result, as some people have said, of a cake mentality of, members in the National Assembly? What exactly do you think was a main factor for the failure of these bills?
Well, from what I saw, my understanding is that it had nothing to do with inadequate lobbying. The two ladies by my side have said it. A lot of great lobbying went into it. I think that attitudes had been formed, and I beg to differ from them a bit. I think there is a cultural anemia in this country. And it traces itself to what they both rejected, the patrilineal nature of our society. There is, what happened was an abhorrent exhibition of patriarchy, okay? The dominance of the male ego in our society is very obvious, is palpable. And what happened there was a naked exhibition of that male ego, okay? I think that the presence of the vice president's wife, her presence made no difference. As a matter of fact, I think it might even have been a form of resentment of many members, because they saw it as some sort of affront. Okay, what are you coming to do? Because I know she was brought in. There was a debate about whether she should be allowed in or not, and most members were not comfortable with the idea she should come in at all. There's a human psychology to all of this. The human response to pressure sometimes usually spins out negative outcomes. Okay, so maybe if I were to be one of those who thought about the idea, I would ask her, okay, you come and go to the gallery, just observe quietly. Okay, so when the point was raised about being brought into plenary, most members were against it. And for the moment, I was thinking maybe, just maybe, she should just have gone to the gallery quietly and observe. But her coming in, rather than help the cause for women, harden the position of men, I could say it. So, but generally, I think it's a cultural problem we have, with respect to understanding that women have an importance. They form the critical mass of our demography. So they have an important role. You cannot move anywhere while taking deliberate steps to ignore a demographic critical mass. It can't happen. Okay, it's like the tail wagging the dog. That's not what we want to see. So I have a lot of sympathies for the two ladies here and the women for generally. And like I said, I was all for what they wanted, but unfortunately, there's only so much one man or a few men can do.
Honourable, do you think the implications of the rejection is understood? Well, maybe I should ask you first of all, what do you think the implications of this, of women not getting their pride of place in the polity is? And do you think those implications are well understood or even understood at all by your colleagues in both chambers?
Well, I cannot speak to their understanding of what the implications are, but I'm very sure that they know what they were doing. I think the persistent nature of the rejections, shows that it came from a very strong place. from a strong sense of what they wanted to achieve. So if someone, and you can only surmise that someone intends the outcome of his action. Okay, so if an action is repetitive, you can only assume that the person who does anything like that knows what he's doing, and so they knew what they were doing. But like I said, I think that the pressure is building, and with the advocacy going on now, and the doubling down by the women and men too. I know that after we left, a few more were not really satisfied with what went down. So a few more of the male folk too have begun to see the reason why they should have gone the other way. So with the momentum building towards stronger and more vociferous advocacy, and people getting to understand the issues more and more as they go by, I think there's hope that maybe the next round of constitutional amendments, it might happen. But like I said, the critical thing for me, I've always said, is the constitutional framework that we have does not lend itself to any substantive constitutional change. Okay? There are many, it gives leeways for a lot of things that shouldn't happen, and provides no wiggle room for things that should happen. Okay? And the present constitution we have creates many advantages for some, and then denies many others. Many advantages to others. And those already denied cannot have a way of coming in, because the impediments are created there in the constitution already for any reasonable or momentous change, in circumstances that have already been cast in stone by the constitution. Okay, I'll give an example now. Look at the misconceived idea of local government autonomy. I voted against anything local governments in the constitution. As a matter of fact, I have a bill in the National Assembly that seeks to delist, remove anything local government from the constitution, because it's not a feature of the federal constitution. Local governments all over the world in the federal system are appendages of state governments. They are created by state laws.
We'll come to some of those issues.
When I see Labour and other groups going about campaigning for retention and, in fact, entrenchments of the local government system, it appalls me.
Okay, if you can hear me, Honourable Bob, we'll come to some of those issues in a moment. We'll definitely come to that in a moment. Pardon me, Honourable Bob. Just to be done with the issues that have been thrown up with the gender bills. And let me take this back to Honourable Elendu KJ, because for a lot of people, the men I've spoken with, they say that, well, this is not a reflection of the general society. This is just a reflection of what's going on in the National Assembly. So don't say all the men in Nigeria voted against the gender bills. That's been their perspective. And for someone who has been there 3 terms representing Bende constituency, you've spoken about your experience largely in the National Assembly. You've talked about, experiences of discrimination, sexual innuendos, physical threats and subordination, mainly from male colleagues. So I wonder, do you agree with those who say that, well, this is the reflection of just the National Assembly, not the general Nigerian society, particularly from your experience?
Well, very interesting question. But let me say that the National Assembly is reflective of the larger Nigerian society. What is the job of the primary job of a legislator? To collate the aggregate opinion of a critical mass of the people at whose pleasure he serves, which means that whomsoever you see, or the attitudes you see in the National Assembly, would naturally reflect the larger attitudes of the people at whose pleasure they serve. Now, do I think that it is all Nigerian men? Probably not. But, and this is me deviating for just one moment. 2 nights ago, my family home in the village was torched. And I believe that it was torched because I am nursing the idea of coming back to the National Assembly. My father's grave was there. The house was desecrated. It wasn't done by girls. It wasn't done by members of the National Assembly. It is just the same attitude of stopping women from being in the political space. And so, you know, when we talk about the men in the National Assembly, the question becomes that the assumption is that in a constitutional review, you go back to your constituency, you bring the provisions before your constituency, you engage with the members of your constituency, they direct you on the way to vote, and you come back to the National Assembly and you vote the voices of your constituency. So my concern here is that when we talk about it, the truth of the matter is that the political space, and, you know, the political space for women, because that is what these bills are about. It is about expanding the space, the political space for women. It is about creating an opportunity, turning back, closing the gap on inequality. The numbers are there. That's going to take us, at the rate we're going, 145.5 years to close the gap on inequality. It is going, there's nothing, the numbers are so clear. And so when we talk about the men in the National Assembly, and this is me not making excuses for the men in the National Assembly, this is just me saying that the men in the National Assembly are reflective of the men outside of the National Assembly, and we see it all the time. On this platform and on several platforms, I've often said that gender-based violence in the political space is probably one of the greatest deterrents of women in that political space. We have a leaky pipeline. Every time there's so many women who come out who indicate interest to run, at the end of that pipeline, you find the token. For the first time in the National Assembly, there are 13 women, I think, in the House of Representatives, in the Senate, and the numbers are dwindling. So, you know, it is not, I mean, it's not the men in the National Assembly that vote for the men or vote out the women. It is that it has become systemic. It is, like my colleague said, or my former colleague said, it is patriarchy. It is, I mean, the amount of misogyny in the system. I mean, for him to actually have said that a lot of people were upset because the wife of the vice president came in to the National Assembly. Now, my question is, were it the vice president, would that have been the same reaction? And I think it is the same misogyny that we suffer in the political space. At worst, sexual innuendos, like I've always said, misogyny, but at worst, people died. I just said it. My house was touched 2 days ago for absolutely no reason other than, and I don't want to play the gender card, but other than probably this is another woman who's trying to rear her head in this political space. So, I mean, there's so many men who have indicated interest to run, have not put up a billboard, have not put up one poster, but it was my house that was targeted, my family house that was targeted, desecrated, my father's grave, and was burnt down. So, you know, I believe that it is just a general societal attitude. I mean, and it is reflected by the people in the National Assembly. Your National Assembly, after all, mirrors your larger society. That's what it is, representative democracy. So when you see those men, they represent the men outside of...
My apologies. The question, one of the questions that comes to my mind now, I mean, with what are the implications of this rejection? What are the implications of not giving the female gender its rightful pride of place in the short run and in the long run? It's for you. That's for you, Madam Lendu Keji.
Okay. I think that first and foremost, it is the common sense argument. You know, you can't leave out 50% of a nation's potential and expect that nation to thrive, especially in a post-COVID world. Everybody has realized that, you know, COVID has exacerbated every known problem that there is in this world. And so what is happening? People are recruiting all hands, all arms, all proclivities to try to bring their countries back from the brink. Nigeria suffered 2 recessions. We can't continue to do that. Of course, there's the argument that why are women complaining there should be incremental growth? We don't have the liberty for incremental growth because we're witnessing the incremental growth in reverse. Rather than us have more numbers, the numbers in the National Assembly are declining. All the 17 SDGs are tailored around women inclusion in governance. Of course, even the United Nations Resolution Resolution 1325 has stated that when there are more women at the table, that conflict resolution is quicker, conflict resolution is wider, conflict resolution is more sustainable. Now, the one thing that Nigeria has suffered in the last couple of years is insecurity. We have spent 8 trillion in the last 7 years. We have lost 35,000 lives. We have lost property worth 3.5 trillion naira. And we don't have women at the table. We don't have women having those conversations. It is also said that when you have women in governance, it increases the rate of wealth of the constituents by 9%. We all know that when there are more women in governance, that the women are more likely to be across the aisle legislators or across the aisle members of government. Now, what that means is that all these positions, hardline positions that do not help integration, that don't help growth, are not available within that political space. We have seen the Scandinavian countries. Examples abound that where you have women in leadership, that those countries do better. So when people now say, what are the implications? The implications are very clear. That, like my sister here said, that Nigeria is a country, is a car that was built to run on twin engines. If we have continued to do with only one engine, clearly we can now see why Nigeria, like the Titanic, has hit an iceberg. Now, another problem that I envisage is that it is human rights. You know, women in a political space have a right to vote and be voted for. We have a right to express ourselves. Look at the judiciary. Now, my question, everybody says, oh, but in the judiciary, the women have taken over. And I think that rather than that be an argument against us, I think it means that when women are given the opportunity in a sane, proper society, that women will excel and they will do well. Now, the question is, these same women who are excelling so well in the judiciary are doing so badly in the political space. So it means that there are certain things in the political space that are stopping women from doing that. And that's why they're asking for temporary special measures. It's a sunshine law. All we're saying is that to help Nigeria ultimately, at the end of the day, to achieve her potentials, because everybody says Nigeria is a country of huge potentials, but huge challenges. And I think we need to recalibrate the Nigerian story. And all we're asking is that here we are, we're putting ourselves forward. We're saying to them, we've shown that we have the capacity to do the work in other spaces in governance. And we're saying, open up the spaces for us in the political space so that we can come and bring our expertise to bear. Now, at the end of the day, Nigeria as a society does better. There's also some studies that have said that societies that are more inclusive with women are less violent societies. Now, if you look as well, the amount of violence that has overtaken our society is one that we must start to ask certain pertinent questions. Maybe we need to get women in the mainstream. Maybe when we talk about Rwanda and so on and so forth. Rwanda was a country that was on the brink of implosion. Rwanda basically was going to be wiped off the space of the earth. What did Rwandese do? When they came back, they brought women and decided to share power. Almost 50%. And now everybody, Rwanda is the toast of the rest of the world. The Scandinavian countries, I don't want to continue to repeat myself, but the reasons, 17 SDGs, Nigeria did not make the MDGs. They gave us another chance with the SDGs, safer societies, inclusion, reducing poverty in the space, and so on and so forth. 17 of them are all centered, infant and maternal mortality. They're all centered around women in the political space. And I think that for us to achieve those 17 SDGs, we must have more women at the table talking about the softer issues. And even now around the world, women don't even talk only about the softer issues. We find that most of the ministers of defense around the world are now women. I just came back from a course in counterterrorism. So it is not, women are also not confined to the softer issues, but women, when it comes to conflict resolution, when it comes to just creating a space, well, Madam, giving hope, selling the hope that I'm almost certain that excuse me, are the best, women are the best people for the job.
Ms. Udi, so for you, where you sit, your perspective, what are the implications of women not being as inclusive as they ought to be?
The major implication is Nigeria is the one that has suffered at the day before yesterday at the National Assembly. It means that out-of-school children will increase. And also it means that the education that has collapsed will continue to suffer. It also means that the killing will continue and that the poverty head of the world that Nigeria has become will continue. It also means that the maternal mortality rate that Nigeria has highest in Africa and second to India that has over 1 billion population will continue to grow. Who knows that whether Nigeria will overtake India? And it's also a very sad commentary on our society because it's the women that knows their issues, concerns and interests, and they know how to address it better.
The issues that you raised just now.
Women should come.
Just 1 second. The issues that you raised now, when you see those implications of out-of-school children increasing and insecurity increasing, how is that, how is that anything to do with women?
It has a lot to do with women because women are the only ones that know what it takes to raise a family. They know that when their children go to school, their lot will be better than their family. Women live for children, husband, father, mother, parents, and family. That's their calling. So they know that when a child is educated, the child comes back to make the family better. They know that when a woman carries a child for 9 months and went through labor and give birth, we don't want that child to be killed unnecessarily. And that's why when women are on the table to discuss the end of conflict, they come with compassion, they come with passion, they come with everything it takes to end the conflict.
But,
so
madam,
when
you just said now,
from the table,
madam, you just said now that it's an engine that runs on, an engine that runs on 2 engines. How do you even put it? It's something that runs on 2 engines, and the man and the woman. So I'm wondering how this has got to be squarely on the table of women when there are men as well.
So the men have been running on 1 engine. I know when you want to carry things that you can carry with your 2 hands, when you try to carry it with 1 hand, it won't work. And the hand will get tired and it's not 23 years after the military left. And nothing has changed. You are my witness that nothing has changed. And I stood side by side with the men. If you doubt me, ask Femi Farano, to fight for the democracy in Nigeria. In the streets, I fought for democracy. I carried dead bodies in my hands in the streets of Lagos. So we fought for democracy. Those who are the beneficiaries did not know what we went through, and they have closed the door against us. Women's blood was used to water the tree for the democracy in Nigeria. So women must come in who has a better perspective because the men we have seen, you are my witness that they have not prioritized the development of the country. We don't have light. We don't have electricity. The conflict is increasing on daily basis. Out-of-school children is taking over the whole world status. Poverty of the world is here. Women are the ones who are bearing the brunt of poverty, who are bearing the brunt of ill health, because the hospitals have collapsed, who are bearing the brunt of children not going to school. You have a 40-year adult in your house. You are still looking for food to feed a person. And because when there is women are the ones bearing the brunt of unemployment in Nigeria. So if the women are on the table, and we saw it in the beginning of this experiment we call democratic rule in Nigeria, a woman was there, we started hearing how much had been disbursed, how much allocation goes to where, and we started asking questions. What did you do with the money? Women gave us power, empowered us, a woman in this country, to ask questions. So much money came to my state. What did you do with it? Women have shown that it's possible to have good governance. Women are the ones, and we will encourage the men side by side, work with them to ensure that there is development in the country. We ensure that the roads are fixed. The physical infrastructure has collapsed. So we will ensure that it is rebuilt. We will ensure that when children go, if you are educated, you don't want to carry arms. You don't want to be a kidnapper. You don't want to participate in it. We need the country to work. And if the country has to work, the country must work with 2 engines. And
well, madam, let me wade.
Justice and social inclusion.
Let me wade into that water of women supporting women. I know it's been talked about a lot of times. And looking at the voter population, you see close to 50% of the voting population, at least in the 2019 election, were women, about 47%. And it goes to say that even in political parties, you have, majority or at least a large chunk of, people that come out. I recall the speaker saying that these women are the ones you will see most during, campaign rallies and the rest. So clearly women have a lot of presence in the political space. So what would it take for you to translate all of that, representation on the ground, as it were, into changes within the political party? I recall, I don't know who said that, I think it was one of the previous reports saying that, how about make the forms free for women who want to vie for positions? I mean, that's something women in political parties, who are a lot, women, across board, can actually put pressure and achieve. So what would it take to translate all of that energy, presence that we see into some changes, at least before we now get to a constitutional amendment, perhaps in the 10th Assembly?
Okay, most women want to participate, even the ones that come out to participate, the women deny them at the primary level. They will give the ticket. Can you just imagine my sister staying here, very intelligent, honorable member, who has shown that she can hold her own? I know they didn't assess her based on her performance, but they didn't give her a ticket to come back. So if the party refuses you tickets, the women have no option, and the women love voting. They will surely come out to vote. So our job, they use even the form. They say don't pay for forms. They even use it against the women. You cannot come here without paying for anything. You come and become a candidate. So we want women to pay for forms. We don't want any free thing because they use it against us. But we are going to mobilize, as we are doing at the political party level. The people you see in the National Assembly are still the members of the political parties that are ready to stop women from coming in. So, but we are going to look for ways to now carry out the campaign. So if we refuse our women PDP and APC, they can go to any smaller party and our women will vote for them. We are going to bring multi-approaches to this struggle. The one good thing that this rejection has done for us, it has mobilized us, brought back our energy. We are ready to go to battle. And our women, if they refuse to open the door, we'll break it open. Our women must come in. Women must come in. Because we are tired of a country that does not work. Country was on trial 2 days ago, and the country was defeated in that battle 2 days ago. Nobody is thinking of the country. That's why you see them go and look for their constituency projects. No, they don't do it. That's why you see them, they are not doing anything. So the country was on trial. They don't want good governance. They don't want a country that works. They want to be stealing and stealing and stealing and destroying the country. The women has to come in. We have to rescue this country.
Okay, let me take this to Honorable Bob.
We don't want the Nigeria to die. So we have to rescue it. Women
absolutely. Let me take this to Honorable Bob, Madam. And just to get your thoughts on this one, the possible implications. So we've talked about the implications of what has happened, but the possible implication of what could have been, which is having those bills actually sail through. And one of those implications that people have raised, especially for creating special seats for women in the parliament, is that if you create 111 seats in the National Assembly, about 103 across the state assemblies, people have said, at a time when we're saying, let's try to cut down on the cost of governance, wouldn't that be against what we have preached, for, which is having a lean sort of government operation? Some have even said a unicameral, legislature, pardon me. So in terms of the possible implication of what could have been, do you think this would have defeated, that progressive nature of this bill if we have to now spend more on governance?
Well, in terms of financial costs, yeah, there would have been obvious implications for the economy, if we're going to go through the route of creating additional seats. But the critical thing was first to have an affirmative vision, of including women in governance process. That's a critical thing. You know, the principle that have been set, this is what we want to do. And then when we agree on that, as they say, the devil is in details. The other thing about, you know, whether to create more seats or actually bring about a method or methodology of including them in the already existing seats could have been dealt with. I wasn't sold on the idea of creating, you know, additional seats. Something could have been done about reserving special seats for them in the current numbers that we have. For a population of about maybe give and take 150 million. Don't get me started on this idea of 200 million. That's not true. For about give and take to 150 million, I don't think we are doing too badly. What we have about House of Reps 360, Senate 109. That's you know 400 and something. That's quite a huge number. So to make it to create more seats, special seats for that purpose would have necessary. We could have come to the table with that affirmative vision. This is what we want to do. We are going to have, you know, women get X percentage of representation every time in the National Assembly, you know, and in different other spheres of the political spectrum. That's settled. The other thing would be how do we go about it, you know, within the existing framework, not to create special states.
Okay, you know, Honourable, so is the costs element part of the reason that you are proposing? Well, the considerations you have concerning local government administration, is the cost element part of your consideration for those thoughts?
No, not at all. Not at all. I am a student on constitutional law. You know, that's my forte. All over the world, you know, local government systems are not a feature of the national constitution, federal constitution. Local governments are, you know, creations of state, regional, or provincial governments. They are funded, created, and the legal framework for their operation are set up by state governments. Okay, power sharing. So the idea of having a three-tier system, federal, states, and local governments, is an anomaly. It's very strange. You know, in any federal constitutional arrangement, it's very strange. So the thing is, you have a federal government and you have a constituent states. Within those constituent states, you have the nearest administrative unit to the people, that's local governments. But that one is created by state governments. Okay, so my bill with respect to local government extension from the constitution has nothing to do with you know, cost. No, it's about, you know, sticking to the principles of federalism. I have people say that, oh, it's not cast in stone. We can have what I might refer to as federalism avant-garde, but it doesn't convince me. If it's not working here, federalism is not working here, and it's working elsewhere, then we have to examine, rethink what we are doing, you know, as the only way to find a solution as to why it's not working here. It's working elsewhere, it's not working here. So part of it, the reason why it's not working here, is the convoluted system, the system that you know, is created in a centripetal way, so lopsided, you know, in favor of the center, and certain advantages created for some people, and those who have the advantages have entrenched them, and they are entrenched in the constitution. Those who have been hard done by have no way of exiting the disadvantages they already suffer in the system. So one of the reasons for, my major reason basically for bringing that bill was to ensure that we go back to the true ethos of federalism that we had in the First Republic. Under the 1960 Constitution, there was no mention ever anywhere of local governments in the federal constitution. You know, the same thing under the 1960 Bottleneck Constitution. You know, these were subject dealt with by the regions, which are now states. Okay, so the idea is that we should do what is proper and let the states have as much wiggle room as possible to deal with their issues. Tell me, for instance, why would why would the National Assembly be debating a triple? Well, I mean, it just boggles your mind.
But Honourable, you spoke to constitutions under the First Republic. I don't know, is it the same thing in the Second Republic, the 1979 Constitution, the botched Third Republic, 1993 or 1992 or 1990 Constitution? Is that the same thing that we have, or is it still the same system that we have on our hands right now?
Okay, let me give you the historical background. What we have now was given to us in 1979 by the military regime of Obasanjo. Obasanjo set up the Dasky Commission on local government reform that brought about the present system that we have. Okay, and that was a misconceived idea of what a country that is spatially extensive and culturally diverse should be practicing. Federalism is tailor-made for a country like Nigeria because of our special extensiveness and cultural diversity. You cannot have a country like this have a uniform local government system. No, you cannot. In the First Republic, it wasn't. And we always hark back and speak wastefully about how well the kind of real significant changes we had in terms of rural developments in the First Republic. How did it happen? Because the states were in control. They were in control of matters that deal with local government development. Let me just give you, just pick your mind a bit. How will you look at Lagos, for instance, wants to create local government. It needs the concurrence of Kano to agree to create Lagos State. Does it make any sense to you? It's totally illogical. Lagos wants to change, local government, maybe Koshofe, from Koshofe to another name. He said, no. Kano has to have a buy-in.
Well,
Section 9 of the Constitution.
Quite an interesting point you raised then. Quite an interesting point you raised there, but we're winding down, and I love the women to have the last say on this conversation. And I'm talking about Honourable Elindu KJ and Madam Odi. So let's wind this down in about 2-3 minutes or thereabouts. And Honourable, first, let me begin with you, Honourable Elindu KJ. I recall you've talked about the VAP law, saying that you try to be creative with it. Instead of saying violence against women, you changed you termed it or coined it as violence against persons prohibition. So that came across as harmful, as it were, to the male gender. So in what way are you going to approach this as a woman and as women in general? So we don't come back here to have this discussion maybe 2 or 3 years down the line. And I'd like you to, close on that one.
Okay, first of all, before I answer that question, I'd like us to talk about the numbers. The details, as they say, are in the numbers, okay? Because everybody's talking about the special seats and how it's going to bloat the size of government. But, it's very important for us also to look at it historically. The 1979 Constitution had already proposed that there would be 5 senators per state and 450 members of the House of Representatives. In 2008, the Ways Report also stated that we should have 108 legislative seats set aside for women. Now, by this amendment, what are we seeking? We're seeking 219 new seats across board. Now, the math, the numbers state that these numbers will be between 5 to 18 billion naira per year, per annum. Now, if you look at it and put it alongside the budget of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 13.6 trillion, it gives us 0.515%. So it's going to move the levers for less than 1%. And this, if we put it alongside, for instance, defense spending in the last 7 years, we had 8 trillion naira. And if the argument that we're proffering as women is that if we have more women at the table, and as my sister said, if we have more women in governance, then all the insecurity will fall back, which means that ultimately it will cut back on the cost of security and it will balance out. All we're asking for is less than 1%. Now, what do you think, to your question? So I think that those are the numbers. So as far as bloating the size of government beyond what everybody thinks, let us bear in mind that it moves the levers by less than 1%. In fact, 0.515%.
Okay, let me take this to Madam Odi.
Now,
let me take this to
yes,
Madam Odi.
Gender violence against persons bill. I think that, you know, as with what we've seen in the Capitol, what we saw in the Capitol yesterday and what is ongoing, the gloves have come off. We will continue to engage with the men. We'll continue to recruit more gender champions. But we will not also, I mean, we've been placatory, we've asked nicely, we've lobbied, we've advocated, we've told the stories, we've made the necessary sounds. But I think that the time has come as well for us to be a bit more militant. And I'm so happy about the tetra-headed approaches to it. I recall that the Speaker had also said that they were going to publish the names of the people who did not vote in favor of this, and we're just going to have to take it to the voting public, which of course make up over 70% of the women anyway, and tell them that these are the people who are making it difficult for us to emancipate the country and create an opportunity for us to thrive. Nigeria has serious problems and we need serious people across
Absolutely.
the board.
We're totally out of time, and I'm just tempted to ask Madam Odi if she seconds that motion, because clearly you've raised some of the points she has raised, lobbying, and of course she said kicking down the door. So let me allow you 20 seconds to wind down on this one, as we are totally out of time.
Okay, we are going to continue engaging. There are wonderful male champions we have, and new ones have come on board, and we thank them very well. And many new ones will come after they see what we are going to do. We are going to raise our advocacy to the next level. We will take over the streets. We also go to our people who vote and say these ones are no-go area. We will vote the people who will help our cause. And we are not going to stop. Women must come and take their place. The space is shrinking. We need to open it up. And we have to do everything we need to do to open it up. We have to make Nigeria to work. And women has the master key, and they like-minded men. Together we will make it possible. Thank you.
For those thoughts, ladies and gentlemen, Nena Elendu KJ is a former member, House of Representatives. Ma Odi is General Secretary, Alliance for Credible Elections, as well as Honorable Solomon Bob, the only man among the women in this panel. He is a member, House of Representatives from Rivers State. Thank you for your time and your thoughts this morning. Yes, so that thorny issue, that one is up. After now, stay with us.
So many issues. In fact, later today, I'm planning to oil my bicycle, because that's clearly the next plan now. I drove to work on a near empty tank, and that's a situation for a lot of Nigerians, those who need it for their vehicles, for their businesses, people that live hand to mouth. I'm talking the vulcanizers, the welders, those who grind pepper in the market, and so on. Those who have to use their generating sets for work. I could go on and on. So this is a boat we're all in together, sadly. And I mean, we've listened to the NNPC from February the 15th to yesterday, things that have been said. So let's have this conversation, all-important conversation. As you've seen, Mr. Olabode Shomi is a special legislative aide on gas and power to the Senate President. He's the Vice Chair, Gas to Power Study Group of Nigerian Gas Association. And so an oil and gas expert joins us this morning from our Abuja studio. Well, Mr. Shomi, thank you for joining us on the program. I'm almost tempted to ask where you got petrol, you know, to get to the studio today, because that has been the conversation between people now. The first thing you hear is, how far? Where did you get petrol? Do you have petrol? Can you get petrol for me? But I'll jump into the main issues straight away. We've listened to the NNPC, and two things come out for me. So as at 15th of February, it was said that we have over 1 billion litres of petrol in stock, and we're expecting 2.3 billion by the end of the month, which, by the way, was 3-4 days ago. If anything, we have not seen all of those, over 1 billion litres or 2.3 billion litres. So clearly there's a disconnect between what the NNPC has promised time and again and the reality. So is it that there's a disconnect from the NNPC? Because it looks like they see this supply, or they have this supply, but the people don't have it. So who do we believe right now?
I think first and fundamentally, as Nigerians, we have to look at our history. I think petrol scarcity in terms of queues on in terms of queues in public is not exactly new. For those who are familiar with the Abacha era, I'm talking about the pre-1999 era, there's been, there was a lot of distance. But it's not important so much as to cry about a history of bad things, but to look at how a number of all these things were solved. In this particular case, what anybody and what everybody should be looking at is verifying what figures are being put into us, which is also a responsibility for the media, by the way, and also to check the supply chain process itself. So the truck leaves the depot and it gets to the final destination, it is offloaded and it sells to the public. So does the truck, does it actually leave the depot? Does this truck, does it actually get to the filling station? Does this filling station, do they actually sell? And I'll give this example. It was Friday last week and I was on my way to see a client when I noticed that a truck was offloading in a petrol station. So I decided to stay with them. It took them about 2 hours from when I got there for the offloading process to finish. And after that, I bought a full tank, which I have used since then. But it is interesting to note that the petrol station only sold to about 10 people, and then they closed shop. So it is not impossible that there will be a few petrol stations. I mean, given by that example, it is not impossible that there will be a few petrol stations that will have fuel and will choose not to sell to the public. So it is a question of the supply chain process being properly monitored and being ensured that it does what it does. So if NNPC say they have a few million liters available to Nigerians, it is incumbent upon us to verify that those liters are there. And if those liters
Sorry,
are
when
there,
you say it's incumbent
what happens
upon
to the rest of the supply
Mr.
chain?
Shomi, just a moment. When you say it's incumbent upon us, there's a regulator. Okay, I imagine you don't mean Nigerians should start opening, the tanks of the filling stations to check, do you have petrol? We have a regulator. That's why we have government. If not, people will just do all they have. But put the mandate in the hands of government and say, ensure that you manage these resources for us. Put regulation in place. Ensure things run smoothly. So who should ensure that these filling stations that have supply, that their trucks have left the depots, sell? Clearly not the people.
I totally agree with you. It's not the people in terms of responsibilities. It is government responsibility. However, in this case where it appears that there's a disconnect between what the government is saying and what is available to the people, so that we can speak from a position of knowledge rather than guessing, it now becomes incumbent upon us to find a way of verifying it. Let me be clear. In every single society in the world, you have non-governmental organizations. And non-governmental organizations are given that name because they do certain jobs that government ordinarily should do. But because of government inefficiencies, imperfections, and bureaucracy, they are not able to perfect it. And it is that reason that non-governmental organizations are exempt from tax.
If I get you correctly, Mr. Shomi, you're saying that government has failed on this one, so people should take it upon themselves to do the job of those regulatory agencies.
That's far from what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that
you said the NGOs should take it on because government has not been efficient. I'm not sure that's the word you use, but you clearly are saying that. So what are you saying then?
I am saying that NGOs exist for a purpose. It appears that we do not know why NGOs exist. So that is what I'm trying to say, that the process of governance and the function of governance is holistic. So, in fundamentals of government, when they used to teach it in schools, they would say everybody is government. So government,
no, Mr.
trying to say...
everybody is not government.
Please.
I'm sorry I have to cut in here. Everybody is not government in that sense.
Oh, that is the definition of those. Let
me land on this one, Mr. Shomi. So everybody is not the GMD of NNPC, for example. Everybody is not the president, the minister of petroleum. So I think there's a simplistic angle to that one, which makes sense. Everybody should be a part of government. Engage the people. But when it comes to regulation, NGO essentially means non-governmental organization. So if you say that NGOs should be doing the job of the regulatory agencies, then you're saying that those regulatory agencies are not doing their jobs. They have failed on it. I mean, it's clear what you're saying, but yet you say that's not what you're saying.
Yeah, that's because you did not listen to me and you did not allow me to land.
I'm sorry, please go on.
When I say I've run an NGO before, okay, I've run an NGO before, and I've attended the NGO conference in New York. So it is possible I understand what NGOs do. What I'm trying to say in very simple terms is that NGOs exist to support the function of governance. And that is why NGOs are exempted from taxation all over the world. The purpose of a non-governmental organization, check it across board. The things that NGO does are things that ordinarily government should be doing. Now, what I am saying is that the NGOs that you have across this industry, or NGOs that offer whatever services across this industry, need to also up their game. The point I'm also raising is that when there are imperfections in the service delivery or in the information that is passed across, there must be an independent way to verify this information to the extent that we will be able to actually know what is happening. In this case, rather than us guessing, rather than us giving an input or an analysis that does not exist, there is a need to actually find out what is happening. And why I referred to pre-1999 was that vacuums were normal to society, or we thought it was impossible. But it came a 2-month period with the Obasanjo administration that everything ended. So how were those things done at that time? So there's a need for us to look at the issues with a way to resolving it rather than pointing fingers. And when I say governance is the responsibility of everybody and everybody is governance and position are not the same thing. And we should not mistake that. Everybody cannot be the GMD of NNPC. It is not possible. Everybody cannot be the regulator. It's also not possible. But everybody has a role to ensure that regulation is properly done. That is the difference between what I said and what is being interpreted.
So, Mr. Showmi, how does that happen? You have mentioned NGOs, and I would assume that includes civil society organizations in the petroleum, in the energy sector. So how do these things happen in terms of whether or not people give feedback to government? The fuel queues on the roads are feedback to government. The number of black markets, peddlers of fuel, that's feedback, which government doesn't even need any data. It is something that everyone can see. So when you say people should be a part of the process and check to confirm the veracity or otherwise of figures or data that government releases, how does that happen?
Okay, so I'm not talking about data in this case. I'm talking about the fact that what has been announced by the government in terms of the availability of fuel is something that needs to be verified. Because if there is fuel and we are not feeling the impact of it and there is no availability of it on the roads, there's a disconnect. So it's either somebody is saying an untruth in this case, or there are other issues to it. Now, if in truth there is the fuel, what are the other issues that could be to it? Because the idea behind all of this is that we want to get the problem solved. So the idea is not that we want to point fingers at governance. The idea is not that we want to say government has failed. I mean, whether it has failed or not is a different issue. But that's not the idea. The idea is that we want the hardship to end. So if we are looking at solution, if we are solution-oriented, if we are looking at a solution, then we have to look at the bottlenecks within the supply chain that could possibly be the issues. And the solutions to getting the solutions to these bottlenecks is what I'm talking about. So if the supply chain is resting on a hybrid of a function between government and the private sector, in which case is within the NNPC and the distribution chain, then we need to check what is really happening. The purpose of NGOs in this case is to offer the public, the listening public, the critical mass of the public that can put a pressure on government, an independent source of information, independent from what the government is saying. So it is basically how society functions. Okay. Because society will not just function anywhere by just saying everything is government. Yes, every rule is government, but there is also the critical mass of people who can put pressure on government to do the right thing.
Do you think, Mr. Shomi, and this is by no means intended to put you on the spot, but it's just a question that one would generally think about. You are in the energy sector and you work one way or the other with government. So do you think with the issue lasting so long, how many weeks now that we've been dealing with this, from bad fuel to fuel scarcity and all, do you think that government is sensitive to the plight of those who struggle to get petrol?
Well, I cannot speak for government in that aspect because I'm not a spokesperson for government. However, what we can say is that there has been, which is also obvious, is that there's scarcity in public, and government as at today appears not to be able to solve it. Those are facts. So other than that, I cannot speak to the mind of government. But what I can say is that there are actions, activities apparently aimed to alleviate it, and it appears that those actions and activities are not able to solve the problem. So it is for us to know what is really happening. Is it that those activities by government is being sabotaged, or is it by those activities by government are not actually happening? So rather than being armchair critics, so to speak, it is important for us to actually know what is happening so that we can put the responsibility on the door of those who should be responsible. That is my own approach and my thinking towards this.
All right. Do you think this has anything to do with the transition between the DPR and the midstream and downstream authority?
Okay, simply because there is an organizational transition does not mean everybody has gone to sleep. If you are changing office, Channels moved their office at a point in time from Ikeja to where they are in Lagos now. And they also moved even within Abuja. And those days when they were doing the transition, the office didn't die. They didn't stop transmission. There's a difference between operational work in terms of executing their role and what happens in terms of administrative work. There's a big difference. I do not think any reasonable person who is in those offices can use that as an excuse. However, it is important for they themselves to be able to say what is actually happening and what are the issues on a daily basis. Because it is dynamic, it is fluid. So the factors that are disturbing 2 days ago may not be the factors that are the issues today. So every day, it is important upon them. It is incumbent upon them, actually, for them to tell us what is really happening so that we can be able to hold them responsible or hold whoever is responsible in case it is sabotage.
So if they need to tell us what is really happening, clearly they've not been telling us what is really happening. So you see a gap in that one. So let's try this again, Mr. Shomi. So, we have the facts from the NNPC to begin with, that we have over 1 billion liters supply. We're expecting over 2 billion liters by the end of last month. And there were talks about that being held back or whatever. But let's still stick to the over 1 billion supply. So that's one fact. We've also heard from those lifting the petrol, that's another fact, that they are lifting it for, 165 naira or thereabout. So they can't even sell at the official pump price because they're business people. They need to make profit. That's also another fact. We've heard from the NNPC and others that there are filling stations that actually have this product, but they're not selling, they're hoarding. So that's also another fact. So we have a picture, as it were, from, people we trust, agencies and bodies that we trust. So those are the facts. So looking at the whole chain now, the fact that there's supply according to the NNPC, filling stations have it and they're not selling, and they're lifting it at, 165 naira. Who should be doing what now so that we end this?
I think, first of all, the idea that selling at 165 naira and not making any profit needs to be verified. And I'm saying this with every sense of responsibility because our supply, yes, there's the fuel subsidy issues, which itself is very opaque. I mean, nobody can actually be able to calculate in a transparent and verifiable manner the amount that is being spent on scarcity, but that's a different issue. But the point is, the DSDP, the direct sale, direct purchase agreement, in which crude is exchanged for finished product, needs to be actually be checked, because ideally, what is actually happening in that place is that in that process is that we are exchanging crude for the finished product. It's at the root of all these things that certain things need to be verified. That is my own view. And a lot of the excuses that are being peddled as a reason for not making fuel available can actually be interpreted as economic sabotage. So it's incumbent upon all of us, just like we do a lot of review of the Ukraine war and a lot of review of all these things. We need to review the economics, the petroleum economics. It's not rocket science. We need to review the social impact. We need to review how this affects the system. Because
who should take the lead on this, Mr. Shomi?
Figures and all that.
Who should take the lead on ending this economic sabotage, you have said? And I think that's where we'll wrap up in 30 seconds.
Anybody can take the lead. Yes, ideally, it should be government, but it's not in everything that government takes the lead. When the U.S. wanted to land on the moon, at the point, the initiation was not with government. The point is this. There is an issue in society for which all of us are a part. Somebody needs to start it. It can be media. It can be civil society. It can even be foreign government. It can be anything. It does not really matter who starts it. The issue is that something needs to be started, and then the solution arrived at. The idea behind that there must be a finger pointing to one person solving all situations is why some things never really happen.
Well, Mr. Shomi, we're totally out of time now. As I said, we had 30 seconds. Finger pointing is one thing. Taking responsibility is another thing, and I think that's what has been missing in all of this. But perhaps this is a conversation we'll have again. Hopefully, when there's adequate supply, then we can actually just have smooth conversation looking forward. But I'd like to thank you so much for your time and your thoughts on the program. Mr. Olabode Shomi is a special legislative aide on gas and power to the Senate President. He's also the Vice Chair, Gas to Power Study Group of Nigerian Gas Association, and an oil and gas expert. Thank you once again. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, even though he still didn't tell you how he got fuel. Anyway.
Well, he did, actually. He said he was at a place where they were offloading, and he got a full tank. Oh, and then that's what he's been using.
Maybe he missed me at that time. Oluwafemi Agbeloa has opinions on these fuel issues as well. I want to believe this present government is not just occupying space, because it seems that the government is not sensitive to the suffering of Nigerians and can no longer be trusted in fixing issues. There is a disconnect with what the Nigerian government is saying about the fuel situation and the reality.
Well, Isioma is mailing on women inclusion, a conversation we had earlier, saying it is really a shame that in the 21st century, Nigeria's National Assembly happily denied women any form of political inclusion. What kind of society are we leaving for the young ones? Nations around the world are taking great strides to include not only women, but every minority for a more prosperous nation. How can we justify excluding nearly more than half of a population, many of them brilliantly educated women? We must reverse this awful decision, because no nation succeeds with half of its population excluded.
Dixon Eka, on the same issue, says, I support the National Assembly on the rejection of the bill to allocate special seats for women at national and state assemblies. Allocating free seats for women in itself is discrimination and reducing the competitive powers of the women. If we're talking about gender equality, then the best way to empower women is to legislate on their education, ensuring that they get qualitative education and charge them to compete with men in entrepreneurship so that they may be powerful enough to compete with their male counterparts.
So let's get into the realm of Twitter now with tweets. We begin with this one from Olagujo Oladele, still on the same issue, saying women's rights are not explicitly recognized in the Constitution. The absence of the Gender Bill Rights Amendment is a stain on our country. This is a setback in the struggle for women's political participation Women deserve to see their equality recognized.
Law Alpha says if Nigerian women have capacity as reiterated by the wife of the vice president, it's time to deploy it ahead of 2023 general elections. But it's obvious that so many societal factors in the typical African orientation will play against them.
And Festus Akimboyewa with this one saying time to bring proportional representation system into our politics, which should help to achieve gender balance in our National Assembly. Our political parties should remove all barriers limiting women and employ electoral quotas to promote more female candidates. It's doable. Yes, it is.
Well, that's Sunrise Daily today. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and God bless Nigeria. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Absolutely. I know a lot of us have to resume at the filling stations with the queue. But
morning duty or afternoon duty.
Yeah. I hope those who are meant to do something really do their jobs. I'm Kaido Kikunu. Thank you for joining us.